There are exits both to the right and to the left of the theater, as you may see. So if you want to recognize where they are at right now, please do so. And there's also bathrooms located to your right-hand exit. And so before we get started, I would like to remind everyone that if you have not already registered to vote, to please do so ASAP. We have a laptop out where some of the candidate materials are, and in that you can just quickly register to vote. It's through vote.org, so that's the application we're using. And so the primaries are going to be happening June 5th, so as I mentioned, if really make sure to register to vote. And if you haven't already walked around campus, there's ballot locations where you can drop off your ballots. And so, as you may know, there are a total of 27 candidates up for Governor of California. We selected the top 9 candidates based off news articles and polls. The candidates we reached out to included those from the Republican Party, the Green Party, the Democratic Party, the Peace and Freedom Party, and the Libertarian Party. I would like to thank the candidates that took the time to come out to San Jose State University here tonight. So now I would like to call up to the stage the candidates. So tonight here we have Josh Jones from the Green Party. We have Delaine Eastin from the Democratic Party. Zoltan Istven from the Libertarian Party. Gloria Riva from the Peace and Freedom Party. And Nickolas Wildstar from the Libertarian Party. Did I say the right party? All right, so before we get started, I will explain to you all the format of the debate and how this will go. The debate is being recorded and will be put online through Vimeo at Joan Simon. So look up Vimeo Joan Simon. It will also be on the YouTube channel of the San Jose Peace and Justice Center, as well as the YouTube channel of the Green Party. And so for tonight's event, we have a 3-minute opening statement. We have a 3-minute with 3 minutes for you all to answer 3 questions that we have prepared for you. 1 minute to rebuttal any question, but no more than 2 questions. And 2 minutes to answer questions from the audience, as well as 2-minute closing statements. Right here in the front, we have somebody keeping time. When you're up to a minute, they will raise a sign, and then when you're up to 30 seconds, they'll raise another sign with the 30 seconds, and then when it's time, there will be a bell that will ring, and at that time, we would ask that you wrap up your remarks. And so for the audience Q&A, you should have received note cards to write your questions. So did everybody receive note cards? Okay, so please indicate in those note cards your question and also to which candidate you're addressing your question to. We will be collecting them. We will be collecting those questions, and so when we collect them, we were going to ask you that you pass them to the right of the aisle, so to your right-hand side of the aisle, and then there will be 2 students collecting them. And then, so now without further ado, we're going to get started with the questions. We also have a TV screen is here as well for the audience to be able to view the question. But yes, and so right now we're going to get started with the opening statement. And so if Nickolas Wildstar will get us started with your 3 minutes opening statement. Yes, make sure it's on.
Hello? All right, there we go. How you guys doing this evening? My name is Nickolas Wildstar, and I'm running for California governor because for the past 10 years, I've been involved in community activism as an anonymous protester and part of the Occupy movement, and have seen the homeless population in my neighborhood go from a few hundred people to over 2,000. I've seen hardworking men and women that make a decent amount of money struggle to pay their bills. I've seen the homeless, I've also seen families here in our state that have been there and lived here their entire lives have to move out of the state because of the high cost of living. I've also seen and experienced firsthand abuses of authority by police officers. So I've seen a lot of problems in this state pretty much explode out of control, and that's mainly because of government, Big Brother, assuming that it can control everything. The role of government shouldn't be paternal, it should be fraternal, which is why, as a Libertarian governor, I am making a pledge to the people of California that I will work to minimize the size of government, to minimize its impact on the day-to-day lives of we the people. Cutting taxes and cutting spending will be my main priorities, because I believe that the best way to strengthen the state economically is to allow the people of the state to have more money in their pocket. A lot of people in this state feel this way, and so if you feel this way also, I'm encouraging you to vote Wildstar for governor on June 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going, yes, round of applause. And now we'll be going with Gloria Riva from the Peace and Freedom Party.
Well, I want to thank Ariadna and the students who organized this event. It's very important to be able to have debate to compare not only between Democrat and Republican, but the alternative candidates such as myself, who is a socialist for Peace and Freedom Party. I'm running on a program of saying that it's time that the workers and the poor, the students, the youth, children, seniors, really have a say in society, have the say, because after all, we make everything run. When you look at everything that we consume, everything we eat, the schools we go to, the places we live, the cars or the mass transit that we take, it's all built, every item, by the hands of thousands of people. And yet the ownership, the private ownership under capitalism, is the problem, that a handful of billionaires, 6 to be exact, owns half, the equivalent of half of the wealth of the world's population. And workers who can work so hard in Walmart have made the Walton family as wealthy as holding the wealth of 62 million Americans. And in California, the politics has been translated into the pro-corporate policies, for example, of Governor Brown, who signed legislation that gave a $420 million tax break starting in 2014 for the next 15 years to Lockheed Martin and Boeing to produce their strike fighter, this death machine, to carry out the wars that the U.S. is planning and already carrying out in the financing of Saudi bombing of Yemen, the killing of people in Libya, the destruction of Libya, the bombing in Syria that we're seeing right now, the threats to Iran, for example. And I urge the students here to be alert against the U.S. plans to possibly carry out war. They're already bombing Syria directly along with Israel. Anyway, we say that the people should rule. We need socialism, but at this moment right now, we could have so many reforms to benefit the people. Instead of bailing out the banks to the tune of $700 billion in 2008, 9, and 10, that the taxpayers are paying, that should be a bailout for the students. We call for free education for all students, cancellation of the student debt, ban evictions in this state, roll back the rents to affordability, true affordability, and stop running this state as if the billionaire corporations are the ones who need the break and not us. Thank you.
And now we have Zoltan Istven from the Libertarian Party.
Thank you so much. My name is Zoltan Istven, and I'm running for California governor, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm also excited that we've gathered such a diverse group of people to speak about different types of values, because actually, I think that's very important. On the campaign trail, it's been tough because, honestly, it's mostly the Republicans and the Democrats that get all the attention. So I'd like to just say thank you for organizing this and having a diverse base of values built into the system. Everybody, all the gubernatorial candidates here come with, their own ideas and their own values, and mine stem mostly from the science and technology arena. I've been a public figure in the transhumanist space, or space of radical technology and science, for about 5 years now. I write a number of columns, Newsweek, Wired, a lot of different places, and what I try to do is I try to incorporate libertarian values, or values of small government, into science and technology platforms. And as a result, I've come up with a bunch of different ideas and policy platforms that I think could really revolutionize how California operates, not only its government, but also serves its people. One of my most important ideas is called a federal land dividend. It's a libertarian version of a basic income that would take the vast amount of federal land that is here in California, and just so you know, we're sitting on about $10 to $20 trillion of federal land in California, about 40 million acres, mostly unused, that could be monetized to do things like alleviate poverty or answer the health care question. Everybody's always worried about, should we have socialized health care or not? But the reality is we have enough resources in California to monetize them to actually pay for not only everyone's health care, but to make it so that everyone can buy their own health care in a private environment, which ultimately is better for society because capitalism has shown that it's been very successful in keeping markets aligned. But in addition to the federal land dividend, I have policies like how to stop school shootings. I'm somebody that supports having very radical technologies on campus, including drones and possibly robots. For example, if you take something like the Las Vegas massacre, it took about 10 minutes for the police to actually stop the shooter. But drones, had they been in a public space, whether they're privately funded or they're government funded, they could have gotten to that shooter within 20 or 30 seconds and stopped that massacre. These are very innovative technologies that we can solve lots of California's problems. So as somebody who's emphasizing science and technology and running for governor, those are the kinds of ideas that I would try to bring into our system to make this state a lot better. Thank you.
Well, good evening. It's so easy, even a child can operate it. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. There it goes. Good evening. My name's Delaine Eastin, and I'm disappointed that the other candidates, Democrats and Republicans, who are in the top 6, didn't come tonight. They managed to show up at USC, and they managed to show up at UCLA twice, but they didn't get here tonight, and I'm sorry. I grew up right up the road in San Carlos, California. I'm a 5th-generation Californian on my mom's side. And I had the privilege of going to some amazing schools. I'm the machinist and the sales clerk's daughter who got to go to these great schools in California when we were 5th of the 50 states in per pupil spending. Tonight, we've dropped to 41st in per pupil spending. We used to be tied with New York at 5th, but New York now spends more than twice as much money per child as California. Kindergarten is not mandatory. That's disgraceful. The reality is that we ought to have universal preschool, mandatory kindergarten, smaller class sizes in our schools, and a chance for every child, when they grow up, to go to college tuition free, as I did. UC Davis cost $82.50 a semester. My best friend went to San Jose State the same year. She paid $42 a semester. If you adjust for the cost of inflation, that would be, in today's dollars, $600 at UC, $300 at CSU. So we're not only depriving you all of tuition-free college, we're really keeping a lot of students away. You know this. I have a good friend. She went to 2 years of community college, 2 years at UC Berkeley, 3 years at UCLA Law. Her debt is $248,000. That is ridiculous. So it's time for California to do what the state constitution says, put our children first again. I was superintendent of public instruction for 8 years. I was the first and only woman to have ever had that job, and I moved us from 47th to 27th in per pupil spending, but we're falling down again. And in a state where you have 2/3 majority of the Democrats in both houses and all 8 constitutional officers are Democrats, it's ridiculous that we're doing such tepid little things. We need somebody who's going to stand up not only for education, but also for housing. California is disgracefully bad about affordable housing. We have 12% of the population, but 25% of the homeless. That's ridiculous. We need to get rid of Costa-Hawkins and rent control. control. We need to get rid of the Ellis Act and not make it so easy to turn apartments into condominiums and take them off the rental market. We need a full court press to ban fracking. I say ban the fricking fracking. We had earthquakes before they were fashionable. My grandmother lived through the '06 earthquake. I know what it's like to be in an earthquake. Last but certainly not least, it's time to have health care for all. We have the most expensive health care in the world, and we have far less coverage than most countries. Let's look at our neighbor in Canada. Let's look at the rest of the first world. Let's figure out how to give everybody in California health care, and let's do it fast. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
And Josh Jones from the Green Party.
Well, thank you, Ariadna. It's very nice that you invited me here, and I'm very glad to see the broad spectrum of other parties here, all the way from Libertarian to Peace and Freedom and Democratic, and myself, the endorsed Green Party candidate of California Party. And there are a lot of things that I'd love to talk to you about. Of course, 3 minutes, makes it very limited. We can get to other things later. But, about, what was it? Middle of 2015, I founded Davis for Bernie after going over to Sacramento. It was really exciting. There were already 30 people by June of 15, and he had just announced. And so that we got caught up in that energy. I had already been an activist and organizer for, I don't know, decades. I'm 51. Maybe I don't look it. I don't know. But maybe it's because I'm part Native American, part Navajo, so I age slower, maybe. I don't know. People say that. But in any case, we had been organizing before. We went out, and then we said, well, shoot, if there are already 30 people in Sacramento, surely we can go to our little town of Davis and start another group. So we got literature. We went over. We copied them with permission. And we ended up winning Yolo County for Bernie in the primary with $5,000 and about 300 volunteers through the whole thing of people power. And it was just amazing. It was about a year-long process, and that was the primary of 2016. But after what happened at the DNC that you all know about in Philly, we went to protest there. A lot of us joined the Green Party, found out that there was no Yolo County Green Party at all, so we formed one and became fairly central to the Green Party of California. And now I'm on the committee for the county and also on the state level, and we've just applied to the U.S. But, I am a socialist. I agree with many of the folks up here in many ways. I noticed that Wildstar had some. I was in Occupy as well, Occupy Davis with pepper spray. I am a socialist, and I do think that we need a public bank. We need single payer. I've been for that since day one, and we need to have we need to make public college 4-year tuition free, plus community college, plus trade school, because not everybody wants to get a 4-year degree. And we need to redress the water plan. The last time it was updated fully was 1957. We really need to do that. There's a lot of infrastructure we need to work on. We need to roll back Prop 13 to just commercial, so that it applies to commercial buildings. Thank you. Please vote for me June 5th. Josh Jones.
Thank you. Give it up. So at this time, audience members, if you have any written questions, please pass them to the right end of the aisle, of your aisle, yes, and there will be 2 students collecting them, Edwin Sevilla and Docho Espidales. And as soon as I can get this, oh my goodness. Oh, technical difficulties. I'm just going to get a little bit of assistance with the technology. So if anyone has any last-minute questions, please go ahead and submit them. Alrighty. And so now at this time, we are going to get started with the questions that we have prepared for you all. So reminder, you have 3 minutes to answer each question. We'll go one by one, and you all have the opportunity to answer the questions. And then after, if you wish to rebuttal any question after, so we'll go through all candidates for the first question. If anybody wishes to rebuttal, please raise your name tent that we have there for you. That way I can see who's wanting to speak. And then after that, we will, again, same thing with time. Time will be kept there. And there we go, figured it out. All right, so the first question we have is, California is home to about 1/4 of the nation's homeless population. How should California address this issue? And we're going to go ahead and start with Josh Jones.
Excellent question, very important. I have been going how much time do I have on this question? 3 minutes. 3, okay. I have been traveling with my campaign all over California. I'm 4th generation Californian. I grew up in North and South and East California. And so, it's already familiar to me, but we're going to every single of the 58 counties. And one thing that we discovered with our own eyes is that wherever you go along the coast, mostly in California, it's incredible. I have never seen it like this before. Do you think there were a lot of tents during Occupy? It's all up and down the coast, San Jose, San Francisco, everywhere. Massive, sometimes inland, somewhat in Orange County. The police or sheriff come through and clear it all out once in a while. They steal all these poor people's stuff. What we discovered, it seems, is that Airbnb, and this has already come up in some, it's been addressed in municipalities in some cases, but Airbnb seems to have at least a correlation, if not a causality, with the people thrown out on the house. And there are people right now complaining in public that they survived as Chinese folks in San Francisco, all these problems, hundreds of years, the earthquake in San Francisco and everything. And thanks to Airbnb, you threw me out of my house. Finally, I'm now homeless. So we have, I think it's 140,000, I think that number is low, homeless folks in California. If Airbnb was regulated, this is the simple solution. You have to live there 9 months out of the year. If you're already living there all the time and you're renting out a room, great. You're adding to housing stock. But as Airbnb is houses, it's basically an unregulated hotel system. I talked to hoteliers, and they said the same thing, that up in Grass Valley, there's an entire new hotel that formed in the last, 5 years or something. And it's hurting his business, and it's hurting the rates that they can charge, but also the occupancy rate. And so you can see a fairly simple shift. Push people out, international investors or investors from somewhere across the country, they want to buy houses in places where people go to conventions and where they vacation. If they push everybody, I've talked to a person who's a friend of mine, he said, I want to rent out my 3 inherited houses. I can charge 3 times more rent. If everybody does that, there is less and less housing stock. We can open up housing stock across the state in one fell swoop by regulating statewide Airbnb.
Thank you. And now, Delaine, if you want to.
Thank you very much. One of the first things I would do as governor of California is declare a state of emergency when it comes to homelessness. We would convene some of the best and brightest from around the state, from social services agencies, from nonprofits, from our universities and our research institutions, and we would get busy building small houses, getting vouchers for hotels and motels, getting these people off the streets. 2 weeks ago, last Saturday, I went to Skid Row in Los Angeles on a Saturday night. It was a heartbreaking experience. First, your number is low, Josh, actually, in Los Angeles, that's about how many homeless they've got. There are 17,258 students at LAUSD. That's just one school district in LA. 17,000, and they figure the number is much higher because most teenagers don't want to admit that they're homeless. The reality is, when I went to the homeless shelters in Los Angeles, I have never seen so many homeless senior citizens, especially women. I have never seen so many homeless children with their mothers, terrified and obviously under extreme mental health danger. We must, in fact, as a state, put our shoulder to the wheel. But it's about housing in all levels in California. We also need to help. Look, we have the oldest children living at home with their parents of any state in the union. There are, in fact, middle-class families where the kids can't afford to move out. Or we are on the front page of the New York Times. On a Sunday, above the fold, a woman who had to move out of her apartment in Oakland because they condominiumized it, she's now living in Stockton. She gets up at 2:30 in the morning to get to the Bay Area on public transit. It's 3 hours travel in, 8 hours of work, an hour for lunch, 3 hours home. Do the math. She has a 15-hour day. She's a poor woman who could use overtime, but she says, I couldn't possibly do overtime. And so we have to really build some housing here. Some of the other candidates are talking about, we're going to build 500,000 units a year. Well, the most we ever built in the state's history was 328,000. So let's get real. We don't even have enough plumbers and carpenters and electricians to build 500,000, but we could build 320,000 because we did that one year. But we've got to get nimble about it, and we've got to make sure that we're actually giving more incentives to commercial and industrial property owners to convert into housing. We need to build more housing by transit stations. We did this in Union City when I was on the Union City City Council. We used redevelopment money to buy up 3 big properties, clean them of toxics, and build multi-story affordable housing. And guess what? The people that live there love it because they don't even have to move their car. They walk out the front door, go around the corner, and get on the BART station. It's time we get more forward thinking about what we're doing, and let's move the needle on this subject really fast because we have a crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, and Zoltan, if you want to.
Yeah, there's no question we have a crisis with the homeless situation. I was born in Los Angeles, and I've been living here forever, and it's just getting worse and worse. I'll probably be the only one on the stage that takes a hardline stance on this, but I do feel this way, that homelessness is not something that should be put up with. I live in a beautiful neighborhood. I had to spend my entire life working for a lot of mortgages, a lot of suffering, a lot of pain in order to afford a house. And the idea that somebody would come and sleep on my curb and then I have to walk out my 4-year-old, my 7-year-old to a school across the street is unimaginable. The other day, I took my daughter to City Hall in San Francisco, and she had slippers on. And we had to watch out for needles, potentially HIV-infected needles, where she could step on it. It's outrageous that government hasn't done something more about the situation and that the people haven't rallied together. I know everyone feels a lot of pity and sympathy, but I think what's ultimately happening here is that we need to take a stronger stance on the problem itself. And again, we come to this idea where I've talked about California has such an enormous amount of resources, literally 10 to 20 $1 trillion worth. I think it's time to start monetizing those resources in order to pay for some of the issues that we have, such as a federal land dividend or this libertarian version of a basic income. We have 13 million people in poverty in California, or right at it or above it, just right around the range, besides the homeless problem. And the situation isn't going to be solving itself unless we actually step up and do something and get these people off the streets into some type of housing. But of course, and I'm sure the housing question will come up, I'm a real estate person by trade as well, unless you stop all this regulation, no one's going to want to build low, income housing. It's just too impossible to do. And so I think ultimately what we're going to need to do is kind of a huge shift, a little bit more of a strong stance on saying, we can't put up with homelessness. We literally need to move them out into different types of projects or whatever it takes so that people that actually do pay taxes can enjoy walking on the streets and feel safe and feel comfortable. And we also need to deregulate the real estate industry so that people can actually build the affordable housing that these people could move into. These are very tough choices. I think a lot of people wouldn't want to do it. I think a lot of people feel too much passion for the homeless. And so as a result, we don't get any of these things done except complain and complain and complain. I think ultimately it's going to take a very strong fist to say, Let's get them off the streets into housing that we have built, and that's just how it is, so that the rest of us who actually pay taxes can enjoy our communities and neighborhoods and not worry about things, and walk my 2 young children across the street to school without having to worry about feces on the sidewalk or needles that have disease on them. Thank you.
Thank you, and Gloria, if you would like to.
I think it's time that, is this on? Hello? I think it's time that we stop criminalizing and demonizing the poor, including the homeless. I was in the Mission where I live, right on Mission Street, the day that the police began the raids a few days ago, and met several people who had been driven out from one place, meager belongings, and it's all they had, forced into another street, and you know they were going to get moved again. And I met one Cuban man, just dejected, so fed up with his lot. And he explained that he used to have a house in Contra Costa County, but he lost it 3 years ago because of medical bills that he couldn't pay. And so then he became homeless. And his arm was broken by police who beat him up in the street. So he can't work. He's permanently disabled. This is the crisis not of poor people or lazy people, but of capitalism and landlordism in specifics in this case. And there's more than enough housing in the state of California and the United States. There are millions more empty homes, including new ones, condos, and other housing, than there are homeless people. The problem is the banks and the landlords and the fact that the banks who caused the crisis of 2008 and created more poverty in this country, driving people's pensions down and other things, evicting millions of people because of that banking crisis, and then they get bailed out while the people lose their property, end up in the street. The problem is that we have to eliminate the Costa-Hawkins law. In November, it'll be on the ballot. We all have to work to overturn the Costa-Hawkins, which greatly has restricted rent control and bans vacancy control, a very necessary feature that we need in California. We should overturn the Ellis Act, which has led to the evictions of hundreds of thousands of Californians, even if they had rent control protection before. I've been to Cuba many times, as you know, a socialist country that has been blockaded by the U.S. because it is socialist. And what people don't realize was that the way that they solved the housing crisis was not by, after the revolution, paying the banks off or lowering the mortgage. They declared in their urban reform law within 2 years that everyone who occupied a home, an apartment, who had been victims of the landlords, all of them were now owners of where they live. And that's how it should be. A roof over everyone's head, decent housing for all, and eliminate this outrage that we call landlords.
All right. So, as I said in my opening, I've been very involved in assisting the homeless in my own neighborhood. I've lived in Orange County for maybe the past 6 years or so, and my wife and I, we have seen the homeless population literally go from a few hundred people to over 2,000. There was an incident in Anaheim where there was about 2,000 people building up tent cities near the Anaheim Angels Stadium. And the Anaheim City Council sat on their hands, as most of our state representatives do, on a $20 million budget to temporarily displace those 2,000 people, temporarily put them in hotels, and now are scrambling to come up with another solution. This wasn't a permanent solution, such as the Costa-Hawkins or Ellis Act. Repealing them are just temporary solutions to the matter. We need to provide permanent solutions. And as a candidate, I'm going to tell you something that's very different than most of the candidates up here or running for governor. And that's that government does not have the answer. There is no one solution that's going to fix homelessness for everybody, because it's an individual issue. Where on one hand you may have a man that's homeless, that's a Vietnam veteran, is suffering from PTSD and in need of some mental health treatment. On the other hand, you may have a single mother that has 4 kids that just lost their job in her home and is now living on the streets or in the car. So it's an individual issue, and that's how government should change its role to get more involved in our community and helping those in need by helping them on a case-by-case scenario. Now, when it comes to what we've put into the system as taxpayers, one example is in Los Angeles. They've earmarked over $2 billion to help the homeless for the past 2 years and have done nothing. So what I would like to do as governor is actually use that money to build homes. There's a company named Icon that can build 3D printed homes for less than $10,000 in less than 24 hours. Imagine how many homes can be built for that $2 billion that we put aside just in Los Angeles alone. But unfortunately, we do have a matter of people such as Mr. Istven over here that are expressing to the community that they don't want these homeless people in their backyard. And that's causing a bit of a problem with the state officials because it's tying their hands and preventing them from actually wanting to move on these efforts. So again, my goal as governor is to get government out of the way. And I really feel like there are lots of organizations in our community, churches, people that just want to help others and aren't allowed to do so. Even in Orange County, if you go to feed someone now, you can be cited a citation and ticketed for wanting to feed the homeless. Oh, that was my time? Jeez.
All right, thank you. So we do have one candidate who wishes to rebuttal, and reminder, it's one, another one. And as a reminder, if you wish to rebuttal, please raise your name tent so I can see. And then, so we will start with Josh Jones for 1 minute.
Great, thank you. As it turns out, housing is in fact healthcare. And, imagine, so the government runs sewer systems, right? Imagine that you had to get plumbing insurance and the guy down the street couldn't afford it. What kind of a disaster that would be. That's what we've got going on with housing right now in another way, in a more complex way, but it's true. Zoltan, you rightly don't want to see needles and feces on your lawn. I completely understand that. I don't either at my house. But vagrancy laws were originally devised to scoop people up to be slaves behind prison walls. If you look at the 13th Amendment, it says that you can be a slave. People can be slaves if they have been convicted of a crime. And this is going on. We have more slaves now than ever before, but they're hidden away. Nobody knew. Now we do. So changing regulations to allow the building of tiny houses, even building government housing, is an answer right now. And we have to do that instead of building so many prisons, which I think, Delaine, you agree with. And overturn Costa-Hawkins as well.
Thank you. And the next candidate is Gloria.
Well, I don't know if people realize that the explosion of homelessness, in fact, the phenomenon of permanent homelessness, began with the Reagan administration in the first budget, when housing subsidies for anyone who was met a federal guideline of poverty and needed subsidized housing was reduced by 80%. And then furthermore, with housing developments destroyed by the Clinton administration. But that time before Reagan, the word homelessness did not exist. We were active in those, I was active in those years, and the word did not exist. In fact, in 1983, the New York Times said, we're not going to use the word vagrant, bum, or hobo anymore to describe people who are in the street. We're going to use the word homeless. And it is government's responsibility in the system, but we need a people's government. It's not a question of government or no government. It's a government for whom? Not for the corporations. And by the way, the city governments, Anaheim spent $200 million building infrastructure for Disneyland.
Thank you. And Zoltan is next.
Look, I know we feel sympathy for the homeless, but I think ultimately, when people start talking about being totally anti-capitalism, such as landlordism or rent control is awful, you're forgetting how America got built. America got built about upon the backs of people that really wanted to live the American dream and make money and thrive. And that's why California is now the 5th, largest economy in the world. And a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people feel like, I can see people shaking their heads saying, hey, that's not good for society. But the reality is, for those of us that work really hard, this is the world that we want. And what we don't want is a problem with homelessness. And so I think ultimately, we just need to really shape up and take the steps to put the homeless into housing situations that are humane, but also, solve the problem. It's a good solution.
Thank you. And now we have Nickolas.
Well, I think as state officials, our goal first is to be humanitarians. I mean, as politicians, that's what we're proposing to do, is to be representatives of you and what you want. So as people of the community saying, I want to help those people in my community, the best job for government to do is to allow you to have the resources to do so. I'm very pro-capitalism. If anything, I believe the best way to build affordable housing is to reduce the amount of regulatory practices, the amount of zoning laws that are constricting land developers from being able to build. Get rid of the payroll tax, get rid of the double tax on businesses, and allow them to be able to capitalize on being able to build a 6-unit apartment in somewhere such as Los Angeles versus it being 6 to 8 times the cost going and building it somewhere along the coastline. So affordable housing can be built, and it will be built if government gets out of the way to allow land developers to do so.
Thank you. And now we have Delaine.
Please let us not fall into the trap that this country was founded by a bunch of sweet people that were just trying to have a magic of the marketplace. Ask the African Americans who are present in this room. Ask the people whose ancestors were indentured servants. And certainly you can ask some of the women who have experienced discrimination even up until this last minute. The fact is, we do have a homeless problem in California. We did Costa-Hawkins in order to get rid of the homeless problem, and it got worse when we got rid of rent control. It's time to call a spade and get rid of Costa-Hawkins, get rid of the Ellis Act, builds housing, yes, but also help people that are on the streets, that have problems with mental illness, that lived with some thug for years and finally one day took the kids and ran away, and now they're on the street. This country has to be a lot better about dealing with the mental health issues and stop criminalizing them. As Switzerland stopped, Portugal stopped, a lot of other places can and should stop, like California.
Thank you. And now we're going to move on to our second question. Let me click it from here. So with the tuition increase last academic year that took place here at the CSU and within the UC system, and an avoided one this year, what approach is necessary to attain affordable and accessible higher education in California? And we're going to start with Nickolas.
All right. Hey, I get to go first. Well, I think the best way to reduce the amount of tuition rates is reduce the amount of salaries that have ballooned for these faculty members. I mean, look at what happened with UC President Janet Napolitano squandering away $200 million. So if you're wondering why your tuition rate has skyrocketed, it's no mystery when you have situations such as that happening. And it's happening from the top down. You have the UCLA football coach getting paid $3.5 million a year. So the amount of salaries that are being paid have been grossly ballooned and inflated, and we can't afford it. And that's what's happening to our UC system. So I believe the best way to reduce the amount of cost for tuition is to reduce the amount of pay for the state representatives. If they had a accountability reform to where now they're getting payments based off of performance, then now they have to show and prove their worth and their value. And you and your education will be proof of that. You would be the one determining that. And that's essentially returning the power of education back into the hands of we the people. So I believe the best way, of course, for the reduction of these tuition rates is to reduce the amount of government's involvement in thinking that it can create a better UC program. I also believe that as governor, I have a fiduciary responsibility to look at the books. And it's without a doubt that companies such as Navient and Great Lakes have been caught red-handed and fraudulently issuing student loans under predatory conditions. So one of the things I'd like to do as governor is audit the state's finances, and if it is determined that these companies have issued loans to you fraudulently, then I will forgive that student loan debt and abolish it, and pretty much return the responsibility of loans being issued to students back to the schools and allow them to do so.
Thank you. And now to Gloria.
Yes, students have been discovered by the banks years ago as a great source, one of the greatest sources of profits, just like the housing market. And why it is that Congress made sure that student loans are the one debt that you cannot declare bankruptcy on, to make sure that not only will you pay, but you will pay big with interest rates. And it's a real crime what's taken place. It's over $1.5 trillion of student debt in this country, and it rises every day. And you don't even have a guarantee of the job you study in, much less a job that can pay the debt. I call for the cancellation of all student debt in this country. And certainly in California, as I've said before, instead of the billion-dollar tax breaks for Google, Facebook, Twitter, Uber, Lockheed Martin, all the war manufacturers and the big corporations, make them pay. They make the hundreds of billions. They have the money. They don't need any tax breaks, and use the resources, raise the taxes on the rich so that people have free education from preschool up. And the other is, it's not going to take politicians. I'm sorry, but the Democrats and Republicans together have created the crisis we're in this state. What it will take is a student movement, a nationwide student strike. And you have the means, you have the power, just like the working class does. I got to school in 1972 as a result of the great student struggle of 1968. I got into Brandeis University. I had the grades. I had no money. And as a Chicana, kids in that school, black and Latino schools in 68, shut down that school so that I and others could go in. That was called affirmative action. And by the way, you said $3 million for a coach. The University of Michigan football coach a few years ago got a $48 million contract. There's money in those schools. It's just going to the higher paid administrators. And I'm for a raise and increase for the teachers. And tenure, not punishment.
Thank you. Now we will go with Zoltan.
These things are all built upon money and capitalism, and if you pull out the pegs from underneath them, they will all crumble. But that said, there is something else on the horizon with the UC system, as well as all universities across the country, and I spoke about this last year at a debate, and everyone thought I was crazy. And in that year, hundreds of millions of dollars have now poured into this field. Elon Musk has a $100 million company in California that's working on brain interface, implants, headsets that can literally download intelligence. So is Brian Johnson in Los Angeles, another $100 million company that works on these things. The idea that I'm going to be able to, my wife's a surgeon, she's an OBGYN, and she wants my two daughters, a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, to go on into medical school. I would literally bet my right arm right now that my daughters will not make it to medical school because either robots will do all the doctor jobs, or there won't be some school to attend. It'll be something that you download. That's how fast a lot of this technology is evolving. And if you think the UC systems are going to survive education just in a classroom, things like that, in 20 years, it's impossible. It's totally impractical. The world is changing underneath our feet with a huge amount of not only automation, but technology that changes the way we educate ourselves. If you've seen this in Wall Street, they're laying off people all over the place. Why? Because nobody can compete against AI and the algorithms. It doesn't matter how many masters you have from Harvard or what school you went to. The world is changing. Education is going to be a very different animal in probably just 10 years, and certainly in 20 or 30 years. If you have children, I do not think they're going to be going to college, at least not in terms of something that you you go to for 4 years. And so I think when we talk about college debt, when we talk about salary, we talk about people getting tenure, I think that's all dreamland. That's like talking about the high-speed rail. Driverless cars is going to make the high-speed rail completely useless because you can just quickly get there from here to there, and the only difference is that you have your car with you. There's so much.
Attention. An emergency has been reported. All occupants walk to the nearest stairway exit.
Exits to the right.
Great. Do you want to repeat the question for everyone?
Yes, I will repeat the question. So with the tuition increase last academic year and an avoided one this year, what approach is necessary to attain affordable and accessible higher education in California?
So as you know, I would just spend some time telling you about radical technology like brain interface that will literally matrix-style download education, and that's coming, I promise you. Even Elon Musk has said probably in 4 to 5 years there'll be some type of commercial product. And you have to understand these things will change the nature of education. But I do want to speak a little bit about student debt as well. There are some people in this debate, probably maybe all of them, that do believe we should forgive student debt. And I just implore people to understand that there's $1 trillion worth of student debt out there. If we would ever do such a thing, you could expect the economy to literally collapse and we'd be back into something like the Great Depression. You can't just cancel out debt. If you signed up for it, it's your responsibility to pay it off.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Delaine.
Well, I just want to remind everybody how California got here. The Silicon Valley was born here not because of a confluence of rivers. We have no Tigris, we have no Euphrates. It was a confluence of educational opportunities. The reality is at that time, coming out of the Great Depression and the war, the people of this state devoted 18% of the state budget to higher education and 3% to prisons. Higher ed is now down below 12%. Prisons are up above 9%. If budgets are statements of values, what does that tell you about what's wrong in Sacramento? We're valuing the wrong stuff. It's really terrible when you got jalopy schools and Cadillac prisons. So I have to tell you, you need somebody in the governor's office who's going to prioritize education. Again, Nickolas, I'm sorry, we don't have the billionaire professors you seem to think we have. In fact, we have a record number of professors on part-time salaries that don't even have full benefits. That's at community college, that's at CSU, that's at UC. The truth is that we are underspending in education. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the rest of the world looked at America and said, how'd they get rich? Oh, they educated their children. So if you go to Canada or the European Union, you get higher ed for free. Meanwhile, we're running the price up like there's no tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, wake up. Let's smell the coffee. The future of this state and the future of the world is about education, for some of the reasons my colleague on the left said. But it's not going to be that nobody's going to have a job. The jobs are just going to be ever so much more important and sophisticated in terms of brain development and in terms of education. And yeah, maybe we'll also do some things about lifting up all boats and not just a few boats at the top. I'm here to tell you that working class kids routinely expected to do better than their parents. The reality is that 90% of the baby boomers did better than their parents. Today, the millennials are better educated and they only have a 50-50 chance of doing better than their parents. Why? Because we aren't investing enough in education. The most important thing that the state of California has to do, and the #1 priority of the next governor, ought to be education, from preschool to graduate school, from cradle to career. And yes, not everybody does want to go to college, but guess what? The machinist on your plane better know some pretty sophisticated mathematics. You know, I debated Milton Friedman one time in Silicon Valley, and a man got up and said, I can't worry about other people's children. I'm just worried about my kids. I want my 3 kids to have a voucher. I said, oh, you don't fly? He says, I fly all the time. I said, well, next time you're on a plane with your family, remember somebody else's child is the pilot. Somebody else's child is the machinist to machine the parts on the wing assembly. When it lifts up so beautifully and you land safely, and somebody else's child is in the air traffic control tower seeing you and your family safely home. This country runs on other people's children.
And now Josh.
Great. Okay, so I was in Occupy Davis as well as the Bernie campaign and a bunch of other things that I've done. And I knew the people who were sprayed on campus there in the quad at UC Davis. Friends of mine, right in the face. And I asked them later, because I wasn't at that spot at that particular time, I was in the other one, that why were you out there protesting? And you know what the answer was? It was they were trying to not have their tuition raised. That's the only reason. It was, pay us more money or we're going to spray you in the face. That simple. So I called up Janet Napolitano. I talked to her, right? I was on NPR. I was the first caller. And at one point I talked to her directly and I said, you realize this was what it was? Because there was a big investigation about it. And she said, no, I didn't know that. And I said, well, we used to have the Golden Promise. We used to have this thing after World War II where everybody could go to school. Intellectual capital of California increased massively, and that's why we have this huge booming economy with programming and coders and the movie industry and so many other industries, the ag industry, frankly, too. And that is an incredible driver, as Delaine was saying, of the economy. Intellectual capital, it raises all boats. And, a friend of mine likes to say that money doesn't trickle down, but information does, right? Money trickles up to the rich. But so I talked to her and I said, we need to have more funding from the government. She said, well, what do I do? Just go to Jerry Brown with my hand out? And I said, yes, absolutely, do it. So she ended up doing that. Later, whether it was from my urging only or a bunch of people at the same time, probably a lot of people. But it did happen, and now I'm very glad to hear that tuition is not going up this year, but it's a constant battle. I would make tuition free. I would cancel student debt because, and I'll end with this, the fact is, a long time ago, and this has pretty much been forgotten, royals would actually call something called a jubilee. And it's where the idea of our bankruptcy laws come from. 7 years, every 7 years they'd wipe out all debt. Well, that sounds crazy, right? How can you run an economy that way? That's because everybody got to start over again. You pick yourself up, everybody says, well, okay, I'll start charging debt again. Probably the same people will come back to me, but you get to start over again. We can't have this thing where you're on an endless treadmill your entire life. You're never going to be able to buy a house. How are we going to have people buy houses if that's the case? So yes, I would absolutely eliminate tuition.
Thank you. And now we have one candidate rebuttaling. Reminder, it's 1 minute, and that's Nickolas.
All right. Well, Delaine, I hate to bust your bubble, but if you go on to transparentcalifornia.com, any of you here, you can go to transparentcalifornia.com. You are able to have access to all state employees' pays. And the majority of them are state employees that are in our UC system. We have thousands of state employees that get paid nearly $250,000 a year. Delaine is a great example of that. She's receiving a pension from us. And as taxpayers, why should the government be using more and more of our money to throw at the educational system that's broken? The fact of the matter is that we do have a ton of overpaid employees. And if we did allow, again, there to be some constrainment there with regards to how much money we're spending on these teachers, then those costs for tuition would go down dramatically. These robotic advancements that Zoltan is talking about, they're years from now. These people in the audience, they need help now. And discharging the student loan debt would be constitutional. It should not be.
Thank you. Okay, now moving on to our next question. What is the biggest role California plays in the immigration debate? And we will start with Josh Jones.
Immigration is a very important subject in California. If nothing else, practically speaking, for conservative people, because we have some of the largest amounts of crops grown in the Great Central Valley of California. I study geology and I understand hydrology really well. And we grow, we're basically the breadbasket of the country. And even, 90% of the almonds eaten in the world are grown in California. So that alone should say we cannot just throw people out of the state. But there are other reasons. Our state is an incredibly diverse place, both culturally and as far as the biomes, so many places you go around, all the way from rainforest up with the redwoods down to the Mojave Desert. Very diverse place, very many people, and that makes our state an incredible place. It helps drive the culture that we have that is so very different from what we see in Washington. And often, you know, it's all about cutting taxes and austerity and cutting everything to the bone, things that have not worked in Greece. You know, in places like Iceland, they said, we're not paying back this debt to the world banks. And what happened? Their economy went right back. They're totally fine. Everything's good there. We can do the same thing in many ways. But anyway, California needs to make sure that the immigrants that come here that make our place so vibrant, like so many people who have come here, even though I'm part Native American, my great-grandfather was Navajo. He immigrated from Indian Territory by force. People stole him and put him here, but he was still not from here. So we're a big melange, and we need a pathway to citizenship. DACA is dangling people by a thread. It's every 2 years. It has to be renewed. It is so important to get past that idea. TPS, people who come because of wars that, frankly, the United States and maybe other countries have started down in Central America. That is, if people need to flee because we cause problems, or our leaders anyway, or illustrious leaders cause problems down there, those people need to flee because they're being killed, because they're environmentalists. We need to let them stay. And if there's an earthquake, we need to let them stay until they get their feet under them.
Thank you, candidate.
Well, Josh is part Native American, and I imagine there might be a few others in this room. They, too, have a wonderful, amazing history in our country and have been poorly treated by our country. So let us be very honest with one another. Every person in this room is part immigrant. And the truth be known, that's the genius of America. Think about it. Last year, 50% of the new Fortune 500 numbers came out. I mean, all of the Fortune 500 numbers came out. 50% of the top businesses in America have one of the founders who either is an immigrant or the son or daughter of an immigrant. That's who we are. We are the children of immigrants. And we have a respect for one another, and it comes from the diversity. Look around the room. We come from all the continents of the world except maybe the frozen one. The bottom line is that we have an opportunity here as a state to, in fact, continue to build on the richness of our heritage, which is to make sure that our immigrants feel safe, feel supported, feel comforted. The truth is, even the DACA situation is dire right now because so many people are afraid. They shouldn't be afraid living in California. You come here at 3 months or 5 months or a year or 3 years, this is the only home you've ever known. This is your home, as much as the other people who are in this room or are watching this on the television. You feel like you're a Californian because you're a Californian. And so we must make a real full court press here as a state to make sure that we lift up all boats. And that means every single person in this state needs to be assured a great education, a chance to live in safety and comfort, a chance to have a great future, a chance to attend either a great technical school or a great college or university. At the bottom line here, though, is we all need to be looking at the horizon. That means long-range planning and thinking about tomorrow in a way that doesn't just say we're going to grab whatever we've got here and then hold on and hope for the best. I've been talking for a long time about the fact the last water plan in California was done in 1957. The last higher ed master plan, that was done in 1960. California needs to actually stop in its place and start doing some long-range thinking. That includes about how we're going to deal with the issues of immigration going forward. That includes how we're going to support every person that lives here today. That includes what we're going to do to ensure that we have a nimble approach to employment as the society and the economy changes because of education. And that includes those plans for retirement, because the fastest growing age group in this state is centenarians. Look out, folks. We need some housing for all kinds of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments?
So I basically have an open border immigration policy, just straightforward, no walls, no customs, nothing. But at the same time, and that's kind of the ultimate, I think, libertarian stance, but at the same time, as you heard earlier with my views on homelessness, I wouldn't put up with anybody deterring society in any way, including leaving needles or feces or people taking away from the system. I don't think immigrants should be able to freely come here and be able to use the health services that I have to pay taxes for, nor do I think that they should have any kind of government services essentially whatsoever, unless it's something where they have signed up, become citizens, and then maybe they can have Social Security if they've paid into it. But basically all the free things like welfare, food stamps, unconditionally no. But if you want to have a system where people can freely come in, I would 100% support that. No checks, nothing. Obviously, to some extent, maybe I would say no criminals allowed or people with criminal records. But I come from an immigrant family. I have a Hungarian name, and my parents came here. They escaped communist Hungary, and my dad did pretty well, and had 2 kids and lived to some extent the American dream. And I'm a huge believer in immigration. But I think at the same time we have to understand that we can't just pay for people to come here because they want to be in America because it's better than where they are, and let them stay here and then use social services that you and I and everybody else has to pay taxes for. I welcome immigrants with open arms. Let them all come. But under no circumstances should they be taxing us more than we are. And furthermore, I feel we should get rid of the majority of our social services as it is. So really, if they're going to come here and thrive, they're going to have to do it on their own. And if they can make it on their own, I welcome them with open arms.
Thank you. And Gloria?
Well, I'm the proud daughter of a woman, my mother from Mexico, who was proud of being from Mexico. And I dread what would have happened to us if we were growing up in these years when mothers and fathers are separated from their kids simply for wanting to live here. And I am for a full and immediate legalization process for the undocumented because there already are open borders one way for U.S. capital to flood Mexico and other Latin American countries and destroy their economies. The signing of the NAFTA agreement, which allowed for the complete elimination of tariffs by Mexico to protect its product, to protect its corn, which fed all the people, and allowed U.S. subsidized by the billions agribusiness of soy, corn, and wheat, forced open the doors of Mexico and flooded Mexico to the degree that now corn that's eaten in Mexico is imported from Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, and elsewhere. I was in Michoacan in 2001 and met various farmers who had to leave their land, one 65-year-old man trying to hitchhike on the side of the road to try to find his son in Chicago. He had land, he had a farm, but he said, I cannot compete with U.S. corn. I ground up the last of my corn, I fed it to my cows, and I'm hitchhiking to try to find my son in Chicago. Because of the building of the wall by Clinton and others in California, and the demonization of immigrants, 600 to 1,000 die every year in the desert trying to find a way through for survival. Several 100,000 Central Americans have been murdered by U.S. wars. Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, and it's not over. And this caravan that just came through Mexico, it's on the border right now. Central Americans seeking amnesty, seeking a way to live, because they will be victims of U.S. policy in their country. It's a one-way of an open border, U.S. capital, I say open the doors for the immigrants. Because society in our country has grown, has flourished by the immigrant labor. And I have a long history, along with my comrades in this party of California, of supporting immigrant rights. There are 17 million permanent residents who don't have the right to vote, who've lived here for years in this country, 11 million undocumented. That's 28 million who have no voice in the elections. California has a great number of immigrants who don't have a voice. That's what the Republicans fear in Congress, why they won't pass immigration process for them. They don't want them to be legal because it means it will change the demographics in terms of politics. They fear the browning of America, and black people, of course, as well.
Thank you. And now, Nickolas.
Well, as a black man myself, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how prejudiced the immigration policy in our country is. Since its inception in World War II, it was mainly proposed and created to control the amount of people that are coming here from another country. So while it's being considered that we want to deport Mexicans or brown people, whatever the case may be, let's talk about the people that are here from Canada or from Japan or from Yugoslavia that have a expired visa. Are we going to deport them all? No, it makes no sense at all. And we have to approach the answer to be more civil. We can't constrict people from freely being able to travel from one place to another. We call it immigration, but it's simply tourism, whether they're coming here momentarily or they're coming here to build a better life for themselves. So as Americans, what we need to do is be embracing of everyone. We are a mixture and a melting pot of all types of races, all types of ethnicities, all types of cultures, all types of sexual orientations, whatever the case may be. We should be proud of being the melting pot that we are. And California is a great beacon of that. So what I would like to do as governor is incentivize the citizenship process by making it free. Right now, to become a citizen, it costs thousands of dollars. In order for you to reapply for your visa, thousands of dollars. I met a Canadian woman the other day. She told me she's been here for 10 years and she's paid nearly $10,000 just to be here. If that was free, not to mention the waiting periods, if we were to eliminate that altogether, then it would incentivize for the people here actually in our state that want to become citizens to be able to do so freely. And they should be allowed that freedom, that liberty, without prejudice. So that is my goal as governor, and of course, with regards to the presidential administration using such a issue as a hotbed issue to provoke the people here in our state to do something that they don't want to do, which is kick out people that are here because they want a better life for themselves. We are a nation of immigrants. This isn't our land, so if anything, we need to remember the motto of this land is our land, and act on that American motto.
Thank you. And seeing no candidates that have any rebuttal, we are going to move on to the submitted questions from the audience. And so for this, I'd like to remind you all that you have 1 minute to answer, and right here they'll provide you your 30-second warning, and then as well as the little timer in case you go over. And so this question is directed to everyone. In the last couple of years, California and the majority of states in the nation have had bills introduced that attempt to criminalize or in other ways restrict the right to boycott and divest, particularly where the issue of Israel-Palestine is concerned. How do you feel about this issue, and would you sign such a bill? And we will start with, who wants to start first? With Josh Jones.
Oh, this is easy. I'm for Driscoll boycott. I want the Mexican people down in Baja, in San Quintin, to be able to form a union. They're not able to protect themselves. They get sprayed with poison down there. NAFTA does cause a tremendous amount of problems. Capital is free to cross the borders, and people are not. But in the case of Israeli divestment, people have the right to not, I mean, at the very least, that's still sort of a capitalist thing. I have the right to not buy something. How can you not have the right to divest your university from a place that you don't want to do business with? Nobody can say you can't do that.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's an interesting issue as you look across the globe, because criminalization and divestment, first, it has much more to do with national policies than it does with state policies. It is a national government that decides these things. And I know that's frightening to some of you in this room, because the current head of the national government is a little bit, how to say, unpredictable and mercurial even. Those are the nicest things I can say. But I do believe that as we go forward, we must do everything we can in California to encourage dialogue, to encourage understanding, to encourage partnership, to encourage people to work together, to find common ground, because the world can't afford for all the divisiveness that's going on right now. At the end of the day, we must find a way to find common ground. That's who we used to be, and that's who we ought to be as Californians, because this is a place that is the most diverse on earth. And it's also the 5th largest economy. When you think about the productivity of this state, it's wonderful. But it's also important that we think about the communication between and among each other and the respect for one another.
Thank you so much. We're going to move on to now Zoltan and then down the list.
I've traveled all over the world to 102 countries. I'm formerly a journalist with National Geographic, so I've seen a huge amount of cultures and a huge amount of ways that the different worlds move together, having been both, for example, to Israel and Palestine. I think ultimately, though, my 20 years as a journalist has taught me that we, as Americans, simply need to stay out of all other people's affairs. Because what we do is we go in there and we try to put on a little kind of dress for them or a puppet show or whatever it is and have them follow it, and then it essentially fails. Now, I don't mind going in there, of course, and putting in Starbucks and Subways and Walmarts and things like that. That's fine. But what we're going in there doing is with our military, telling them how to behave. You don't tell other nations with totally different cultures how to behave and expect it to go well. It never goes well. America's been at war like over 50% of its time since its inception. It's insane. So I think we just need to, when we talk about divestiture and things like that, America just needs to back off and let people figure it out themselves.
Thank you. We will have now Gloria.
Well, I disagree that it's only a federal issue. Shame on Governor Brown for signing the bill into law that prohibits sanctions, boycott, and divestment of corporations and institutions of the state that do business in the state, trying to hamper the anti-apartheid, anti-genocidal policy of Israel and the United States. The Palestinians are being brutalized today simply for protesting. It's genocide. And our government is giving $4 billion on top of the weapons that they keep financing to Israel to massacre people. So I say the divestment, boycott, sanctions movement must grow for our efforts, and to demand an overturning as governor, I would immediately reverse that signing by Governor Brown. And the other is that there's a strong movement in South Africa that says and notes that the apartheid system of Israel is even worse than what existed there, and they support Palestinian self-determination.
Thank you. Oh, yes.
All right. Well, I know he's not here, but Villaraigosa took an oath as a Democrat to support Israel as the capital of Palestine. This is all a world issue, and I'm running for governor of California. I'm not running for president, and I want to talk about the people here in California. And my job as a sworn government official is to uphold the United States Constitution. Under the First Amendment, we, as sworn officials, would be protecting your First Amendment right, which includes 5 things, 2 of which is your right to freedom of speech and your right to assembly. Under the trespass law that was passed by President Barack Obama, or actually an executive order, that actually is a constriction of your right to express yourself. So as a government official of the state, I just want every state official to be able to recognize your right to express yourself about any world issue. But as a state representative, my focus will be on helping the people here in California.
Thank you. The next question we have is, again, for everybody. How do you feel about SB 320, the bill that would require UC and CSUs to administer the abortion pill on campus? Due to the liability and safety issues that would be placed on our administrations, will you take action to overturn it? And we will start with Josh Jones again.
Well, I'll be honest, I haven't studied this. And, I don't think anything should be compulsory if that's what's being said here. I will study SB 320. And anybody who wants to get a hold of me at info at josh4gov.org can do that. Please send me what you know about it, how you feel about this, and how it's important to you. I think women's rights are vastly ignored and overrun. At least we have two women on the table here on the panel, but these kinds of concerns are something that men actually. I almost think men shouldn't even have a say in this. If women need this kind of a medicine to control their fertility, because frankly, y'all are the ones that have to deal with that, then you should be able to do it. But I'll check in on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. I heard many years ago a saying, if men could get pregnant, abortion would be a sacrament. I think a woman should have complete and total control over her body, and I do believe that a woman should be given the opportunity to have such a pill if for any reason she believes she does not want to give birth to a child, whether it's because of rape or incest or whatever. And I have to say that I'm afraid for our country when I see someone like this new governor who's just signed away a woman's right to have an abortion after 6 weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Twain said the problem with common sense is it's not very common. How could a bunch of people who say therefore they care about children but then don't want to pay for prenatal care and don't want to give infant care or universal preschool or a host of other things be telling women they must have a child? It's ridiculous.
Thank you.
So I'm not for anything that's compulsory. But at the same time, I do believe very strongly in women's rights. And just as proof of that, I'm married to an OBGYN who works at Planned Parenthood. We do shaker packages. She deals with protesters. She dealt with protesters today. So I'm really on the front lines of the women's rights movement. That said, I don't think the government has a role in actually paying for any kind of medication to be given out at a public university, but I absolutely think it should be able to be given out if it wants to, and people should make that choice themselves. I just think they should make this choice themselves and pay for it themselves.
Thank you. Oh,
Well, I agree with Josh and Delaine about the issue of women's rights. Women are under attack across this country, with people from Trump to Pence, who himself signed almost 20 laws as governor against women and LGBTQ people. We just saw another state now sign into law prohibiting abortion at 6 weeks. It's really a crime what's taken place against women. And by the way, that pill is safer actually than even an abortion, statistically. And so women should be able to have access to that pill. And abortion should be free and on demand, as well as all health care. It's time to stop the attack on women. Again, it's the movement. It was the women's movement that won us our rights in the first place. And it will take the women's movement revived to win them back.
Thank you.
Well, as a libertarian, I strongly support women's rights and as an individual. And as a governor, I would do my best to make sure that everyone is being respected as an individual and not looked at as being inferior, whether it be based on your gender, sexual orientation, race, et cetera, et cetera. There should be no discriminatory practices whatsoever. However, when it comes to government's investment into imposing these laws on certain businesses, that definitely should not be the case. Government shouldn't be mandating any requirements on any business. And the school is a business. There's nursing homes right now that are being forced to comply with letting same-sex marriages in the nursing homes. And this is a matter of small bills being passed through our legislative body and then being imposed on these businesses, where we then, as taxpayers, are now spending more of our money on having this, on having these laws be enforced. They need to be removed altogether.
Thank you. And so that concludes our Q&A from the audience. At this moment, we will be moving into closing statements. So as a reminder, you have 30 seconds to any last words you would like to leave the audience, and then after that we'll be wrapping up. So if we could start once again with Nickolas to give us any closing remarks.
Well, as you heard me say a few things up here about the Constitution and the role of government, one thing that I would like to leave you with is that as you may hear all of these candidates make promises to you, my promise is I'm not going to make any promises at all. The only thing that I can guarantee you is that I will do my job to the best of my ability as governor, and everything I have in power to do, consider it done. We need to stop employing state officials, people that represent us, that pretend to know better.
Thank you, Nickolas. Now, 30 seconds. Yes.
30 seconds. Well, in our capitalist society, the most militarized and the most anti-worker in the world, we also are affected by the anti-socialist propaganda all our lives. I really urge the students to get involved because it's the movement that makes change. And you look in the history of our country, everything we've ever won was by struggle. And check out our table of Peace and Freedom Party. I'm also a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is a nationwide socialist party. It takes a movement. And thank you.
I've been running as a libertarian science candidate, somebody that wants to bring technology and science dramatically into our worlds, more so than we have right now. You have to understand that when you look at the trajectory of the microprocessor, the world is going to be changing dramatically over the next 10 and 20 years, and no government is doing anything about it right now. No officials, nobody's even discussing AI, genetic editing, these radical technologies that can literally change our lives and will be changing our lives. I'm the person out there who's trying to put forth some policies where we can actually look forward and say, this is the best way to run our state.
I was elected twice to a city council. I was elected 4 times to the assembly, and I was twice the superintendent of public instruction for the state of California. I've run 14 times, and I've won all 14 elections. And I know a lot about what we need to do in the state of California to take care of our children, to take care of our health care, to take care of our environment and make sure everybody has clean air and clean water, and to make sure that in the long run we take care of our seniors. California needs somebody who's going to put their shoulder to the wheel, who knows their way around, but also who leads. And I promise you, I will do that. It's time we had a woman governor.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Josh Jones. As I've said, I'm running for governor 2018. I encourage you to vote for me. June 5th, G for governor, little joke in Green Party. And, I think one of the super important things is we need to end Citizens United. A corporation is not a person. It's not. It's an inanimate legal fiction. And money is not speech. We need to get corruption out of politics. We also need a public bank of California.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and so with that, I would like to just thank everybody who took the time to attend, everybody who took the time to participate in these debates. I don't know when the last time we had debates at San Jose State was, but I'm so sorry. It's because I want to be respectful of time, and so. Okay, we'll if you would like to join us on stage for a minute.
Hey guys, my name's Shubham Goyal, and I'm actually the youngest candidate for governor, 22. The reason I wanted to run is basically I wanted to show everyone that in California you see that money and fame dictates who wins the elections. It's no surprise. You see these ads full of Newsom and Antonio, who's going to promise you the world with all the money they raise that they're going to save California. But it's not the truth. So I wanted to run to show you that all you need is courage and all you need is a plan, and you can change your environment. You don't need these people to rely on. You can rely on yourself. And then I quickly just want to dive into a couple platforms. I was born and raised in California. I'm part of the public education system. I graduated from UCLA, so I firsthand saw the crap that the Board of Regents was pulling. I mean, president of the UC, Janet Napolitano, who runs the Board of Regents, she got caught hiding $175 million from the students. The Board of Regents delays Board of Regents meetings every time they raise the tuition for international students. My first platform is the governor will no longer appoint the Board of Regents. The students of the UCs will appoint them themselves. This will be for the students, by the students, to the students. Thank you, yeah. The platform's called Board of Regret, actually, because Board of Regents. Yeah, anyways, also, I work at a virtual reality company, so I see how all this new technology can fix the problems that we've faced for so long. So for healthcare, right, what I say is we should create a public database of opted-in health records. And what we do with this is we let health companies in California who use artificial intelligence, they can use artificial intelligence on these opted-in records. Oh, yeah, okay. And then that will save billions in preventive care. I just wanted to say, you're going to see all these ads with these powerful people saying they can protect you from the world, they'll fix everything. But remember that it's in you. You can fix the state yourself. Don't rely on these people. It's like Disneyland. It doesn't exist. So fix the state yourself. My name's Shubham Goyal, and Christopher Carlson's a candidate also. He's a really nice guy. Please check himself. Veronica's as well. I wish you the 5 the best. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm sorry.
You speak great, and I hope you do really well.
Yeah, so with that said, I would like to thank the candidates for taking the time to come out here. Thank you so much. And and as mentioned, make sure June 5th primaries are coming up. There's ballot drop. You can drop off your ballots around campus. There's little posts where you can drop them off. So I encourage you, if you haven't registered, we have a registration, a laptop where you can register to vote outside. And so with that, we have to conclude the evening. Thank you for coming and have a good evening. Bye-bye.